Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our short webinar on the management review meeting. So, CertiKit, we're a leading creator of compliance toolkits and provider of ISO services, and we're based in a very cold and wet Derbyshire in the UK. Since 2011, we've helped more than 4,000 customers globally achieve compliance to various standards. We specialize in ISO standards and data protection compliance. Our mission is to make compliance easy so that more organizations can achieve certification too, and also benefit from the chosen standard or the data protection regulations, GDPR, Cyber Essentials, etc. Our ISO consultancy and internal auditing services are available remotely, and we do this via Teams to companies across the UK and the EU, and sometimes further afield. And if you want to find out anything more about CertiKit, what we can do, what toolkits we've got on offer, please visit our website at certikit.com. Now, a little bit about me. I'm Ted. I'm one of CertiKit's compliance consultants. I consult on ISO standards 9001, 14001, 45001, and 22301. And I help new customers and current customers with any problems they've got and help get them into a certifiable position. I'm also the technical author, and I help develop the toolkits and document the toolkits, so any amendments that come along or any new ideas we have for the toolkits, I'm the one that sticks them in the documents. I'm a certified 9000, 14000, 45 and 22301 lead auditor, and I've got about 20 years of experience across many different business sectors, different size companies, from one-man companies all the way up to multinationals. I'm also a black belt Lean Six Sigma practitioner. What we're going to cover today then. We're going to look at what the management system, management review for the system is all about and why we need it. We're going to look at the objectives of the MRM, who's involved in the meeting, suggested structure for the management meeting, expected outcomes from the meeting, actions arising from the meeting, and then finally, the effectiveness of the management meeting. It's a small subject which has a big impact on the management systems, and people don't realize this. And that's the reason we're doing this short webinar today, is to sort of bring it to people's minds how important this action is within the management system. So, what is a management review? Well, it's written down in clause 9.3 of the ISO standards that are all written in the Annex SL format. So that's 9000, 14, 45, 22301, 27001, 22000. All of these have been written in the Annex SL format. So they've all got the same number of clauses, all got the same title for the clauses. And I would say they're probably 60% the same throughout the actual document. The clause actually states that top management shall review the organization's management system at planned intervals to ensure the continued suitability, adequacy, effectiveness, and alignment with strategic direction of the organization. Now, the thing to take home here is top management shall review. This is not a job for the management system manager, so it's not a quality manager's job. It's not the environmental manager's job, the information security manager's job. This is actually executive management job to review the management system. So this is important. This also links back to clause 5 of all the standards, which is leadership, where it actually states that executive management, the top CEO, MD, is responsible for the management system. So this actually falls under their remit. And the other thing to remember, that this is actually a mandatory requirement of the standard. If you don't do it, you don't have it in place, or you don't do it properly, then there's either a minor non-conformity or a major non-conformity when you come to doing your audits. So it's important to think about this. So who does it, or why does it? Why do we need to have it to happen? So the review of the effectiveness of the management system, this is the whole reason behind it. So actually see what your management system is doing and if it's doing it effectively. We're also looking to see if it's actually still adequate to what you need it for in a business. So if you've certified to environmental management and you've put it in place because you want to become more environmentally friendly, you want to reduce your carbon footprint, and this is one way of measuring it, you review it to see if it's working. If it's not, this is where you find out it's not working and where you discuss how to get it changed so it does work. It also helps identify areas that need to be amended for either compliance with the requirements, compliance with other legal requirements, statutory or mandatory, or improvements of areas of the management system within the business, within the scope of that management system. And also a chance to check that your policy and your objectives that are aligned with your management system are actually suitable, are still relevant. Also checks that your processes and procedures for your critical management systems are still working properly. And it also checks that the evidence documentation to go with it is there. And it is the evidence documentation that the audit is going to be checking to make sure you're actually compliant. So the objects, there's lots of different objectives for the management review meeting and what's going to come out of it. And these are just some of them. It's going to take advantage of potential improvements in areas of the business. It's going to help you pinpoint those areas within the business, within the scope of your management system, that can be improved upon, therefore increasing the benefits of the management system. It will help you identify and address potential risks. Since 2015, nearly all of the ISO management systems have been rewritten, and they're all now risk orientated. In 9008, when ISO 901 was promulgated, it wasn't risk orientated. With the 2015 edition, it became a quality risk management system, and all of the management systems within ISO now have that drive. So this review helps identify areas of potential risk. It will help assess changes that have happened in your business that could affect the management system. So if you have new machinery, you've opened a new department, you've opened a new area of the business in a different geolocation, this is all discussed. Does this have an effect on your management system? If it was environmental, it may do. If it was information security, where you're passing data across different departments or different geographical areas, yes, it's going to have an effect. This is where it's identified or helped to be identified and discussed at the top level where decisions are made. It helps identify trends within the business, such as recurring complaints or process problems or communication problems. When it's happening at the front end, you don't tend to see it, but when you collect and collate all the data and you present it, you can actually identify these trends. So I'm ex-military, and we've always had a saying that prior preparation prevents bad performance, and it's the same with the management review here. Preparation will help the speed of the management review, the correct data to be there, identifying the right people, and therefore making it more efficient. The last thing I want to see is a management review that takes 14 hours. And I've seen them go on because people haven't been prepared. They haven't got the right data. They didn't know what to bring. So preparation is important. And there's four main areas to look at when we look at preparation for a management review system. It needs to be delegated to somebody to prepare it. Now, normally this goes down to a manager. So it could be the management system manager, the quality manager, environmental manager, etc. It could be an executive assistant, somebody who's going to set up the areas for the management meeting. So the first thing we want to know is when the meeting is going to take place. The requirement in the standard is that it has to take place at least annually. My recommendation, if you're going for certification or you've just been certified, you should be looking at doing your MRM twice a year, biannually. Reason behind that is if you wait a year to do your review of objectives and things like that, and you haven't achieved them, that's not a good result for an auditor who's going to come in to do your first surveillance audit. So if you do it 6 months after you've started, one of the requirements that you'll see a little bit later is a review of your objectives. You'll see if you're on target for what you've set your objectives to be. And if they're not on target, you've still got 6 months to amend what you're doing to reach the target or amend the objective to achieve that target. So we need to have a schedule of when these meetings are going to take place. It's always nice to know where the meeting is going to be held. Some companies I know have it in the same place, and then some companies, multinationals, have it in different parts of the business. So one year they'll do it in London, next one is in Bristol, next one is in Newcastle. So if you're going to change venue, people need to know in advance. Who's required? Who needs to be there? And when we go on to the next slide, we'll actually look into that in a bit more depth. But the people who need to be there need to know they're going to be there. So that's important to identify. And then finally, what's going to be on the agenda? And again, we'll see a little bit later on, there is an agenda within ISO, within section 9.3. It tells you what they expect you to talk about, but you can also add other things to that agenda that suit your business or your business needs, especially where they're aligned to strategic directions. So who do we say we need to have there? I did mention before, the ultimate responsibility is at top management. So the CEO or the MD should chair this meeting because according to clause 5 within the standards, they are ultimately responsible for the management system. If they can't make it, then their designated deputy will have to be there. Obviously, the management system manager has to be there. So if the 9001, the QMS manager will be there. If it's 27001, the information security or the IT manager is going to be there, etc., etc. And then depending upon the scope of your management system, the heads of department that fall within that scope should be there. They're the ones that are going to be collating their data that's going to be bringing in the information that's going to be supplied to the management system. So they are definitely going to be there. And process owners where necessary. Now, a process owner could be anybody. It could be another manager from a different department that the scope doesn't actually fall into, but through changes over the past year, they've actually been identified as being part of that management system. So they would be invited to it. It could be a process owner of a critical process that has had problems in the past that's been identified, and they've been invited to explain what they're doing about it, etc., etc. So these are the minimum that would be involved within the management meeting. They'll be sat around that table. So I've already said that there is a structure within 9000, well, within the standards. They're pretty much all the same, apart from where it states objectives, it would say quality objectives, environmental objectives, information security objectives, etc. But they're fairly much the same. And the standard says management review inputs, list the inputs that will satisfy the requirements of the ISO standard. However, you can add your own review inputs. So the ones that the standard requires, and these are examples based on the 9001 standard, is review of outputs from previous meetings. So the first thing you do is, if you haven't had a management meeting before, you would ignore this, but if this is your second, third, fourth, etc., review what you said at the last meeting. There may be actions there that should have been fulfilled or haven't been fulfilled. You'd quickly discuss those. And then risk and opportunities in clause 6.1. 6.1 deals with internal and external issues, and that's the same throughout all of the standards. So you would discuss any new internal or external issues that may affect the management system. Any changes that affect your management system, clause 6.3, new division, new equipment, new regulations, things like that. In 9001, clause 8.4 talks about external supplier performance. Now that's a mandatory procedure within 9001. It is in the other ones, but it's not as heavily documented. So within 9001, you must review your external supplier performance at the management meeting. Generally, what would happen is that these have already been reviewed by the different departments, and it is those results that come to the management meeting. You wouldn't go through a list of all your suppliers at the management meeting. You would have the ones that have just been reviewed. Again, for 9001 customer satisfaction, this is where you'd be looking at your, and hopefully everybody collects customer satisfaction, for it doesn't matter what company you are. Look at how happy are they? Look at the complaints, see if there's any underlying trends, as you'll see in a second. Audit results, clause 9, this is the same across all standards. You'd be looking at the audit results where there have been non-conformities, not necessarily observations, but the ones that had identified non-conformities, because they're the ones that would be picked up by an auditor when you come to your recertification. Extent to which objectives have been met. Again, this is what I was saying just now. If you're a new company, you should be doing your management meeting at least twice a year, maybe 3 times a year, for this specific reason, to make sure your management objectives are actually aligned and still going to meet those dates that you've set. Don't forget, all objectives are SMART objectives. So they're specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound, and that's the T that an auditor is going to be looking at. And this is where you can look at them. And if you need to change them, you can change them. Also, this is the time where you review them and say, well, actually, we've achieved that now. Let's have a new objective, and you put the new objective in. And then non-conformities and corrective actions taken. Now, these are the non-conformities from your internal audits or non-conformities from your last certification audit or surveillance audit. So it's important here to discuss those to find out, have we closed them out before the auditor comes back? Have they achieved the results they wanted? Is there anything else we need to do about it? That's the sort of thing. And these are actually stipulated within the ISO, so they must be covered. So when you look at your management review for your specific management system, make sure you've covered these off in the agenda. Because an auditor will ask you, show me your agenda for your management review meeting. If they're not there, there's a minor non-conformity. Other things you can look at are changes to internal external issues that have an impact upon your management system. Now, external ones could be like new regulations or changing regulations, statutory or mandatory, how your suppliers are working or not working, or maybe if we think about what's happened in Ukraine and we've got business in Ukraine, how that could affect us, whether we're importing or exporting from there, all of those sort of things. Adequacy of resources. Now, resources are not just physical things. They're resources are time, resources are budget, resources are manpower. And within manpower, the resources could be competent people, training requirements, those sort of things. These are things that you should be thinking about that you could add to your meeting to make sure you covered it off within your management system. You know, these are areas that could affect your management system. Do we have the right people with the right skills to do that job? Well, we got the right we got a person in there, they're working towards it, and there's a training regime, but is that the right training thing? This is what would be discussed. OFIs, opportunities for improvement. This is one of the things that comes out of audits, both surveillance audits, certification audits, and internal audits. If somebody sees something and says, well, have you thought about doing it this way? Or what about moving that over here so it's a bit quicker to move things around? Opportunities for improvement to discuss. These aren't need to be actionable, but they could be identified. It's also a good time to look at your critical processes, any legal requirements, especially if you're certified to one that has statutory and mandatory requirements for compliance. But put it in if you think it's going to be worthwhile. If it's not, especially when it comes to your critical processes, that could be done departmentally and then brought up at your management meeting and say, right, we've done a, excuse me, we've done a review of our critical processes. Process A is good, process B is all right. Process C, we've had some problems in the past. They were audited. We did have a non-conformity. We've now fixed it. This was the root cause analysis. It's all back up and we're monitoring. So it's a précis. But the important thing around this table is you've got the right people to hear that information because it could have an impact upon other areas of the business. And that's why the senior management need to be there. So what do we expect to get from the management review meeting? So we're looking at decisions and actions that arise from the discussions that take place on the agenda issues. So those are related to OFIs, which include business processes. You know, within that process, we reviewed it and we've decided we want to change it. We're going to do this. It's going to make it more efficient. It's going to save that interface to the problems we've been having in the past. Any actions that would improve the management system. Again, that could be resources. It could be new processes. It could be a reduction in documented information because we've changed it to doing this way. It could be automation, whatever it is. Amendments to objectives. We've said, right, that's the objective. We've achieved that objective now. Do we want to carry that on next year? No, we're happy with that. So let's look at a new objective. Or we've got to this objective. It hasn't quite achieved that 5% we were looking for. We need to find out why. Let's carry it on for another year, but amend how we're doing things. All of those sort of things within your objectives. What sort of resources have been identified that you need for the future? Any amendments to policies and supporting documents? You may turn around and say, right, our policy now, we've just opened a new facility in Newcastle, so we need to include those in the scope. So, and we need a new policy because we're there doing this part of things within the company. Identify trends that could be a risk and opportunity to business. A lot of this could come from customer complaints. It come from consistent non-conformities in process areas. I'm always amazed when I've done audits and I ask people, I said, right, where's your complaint log? Oh, we don't get complaints. And I don't believe that because there's always a complaint somewhere down the line. But a complaint should be looked at in a positive fashion. A complaint is an opportunity for improvement. It could be, I didn't get that on time. So there's an opportunity there to find out why they didn't get it on time, improve your process, and therefore that's not going to happen in the future. Always look on the bright side of a complaint. A complaint is actually a gift to help you improve. And that's what an auditor will be looking for when he asks you, have you got a complaint register, how you process it, and what do you identify your trends are within complaints. So it's always a good idea to look at your complaints as trends as well. Any action raised during the management meeting review that are not agended? Minutes of the management review meeting. This is the important one. This is the takeaway one. This has to be done. It is a requirement of the standard. You must produce evidence that you've held a management meeting, and the best way of doing it is to have the minutes. Within our toolkit, there are templates for management minutes to help you document it all. all of the outcomes have to be documented, because when an auditor sees you've done this and this and this, he'll want to see evidence. Therefore, within your minutes, if you said we have discussed the objectives, objective 1 has been complete, and we have now changed that to a new objective. Objective 2 didn't achieve the full objective. However, we are going to carry that on the next year to see if we can achieve it and amend what we're doing. Everything's got to be documented, so an auditor can see you've had the meeting, you've discussed the things on the agenda, you've brought out action points, you've assigned people to those action points. That's the important thing, and you've seen the results of those. So actions arising then. You need to designate a member of staff to check that the actions agreed during the meeting have been started or are in progress or completed. If your management review, your certification surveillance audit is a few months after your management review meeting, an auditor will expect to see evidence of the fact that, oh, in your minutes, you said you were going to do this. Have you started that yet? I don't know. And then the auditor will start digging. So you need to assign somebody who's going to check up that any actions have been designated to a person. That person has started it, or is in the progress of it, or has completed it. Those that aren't completed or aren't started need to be investigated and maybe further action, an action plan put in place. And an action plan is exactly what an audit is going to be looking at. If there are any changes to policies, objectives, or processes, these have to be communicated to the business as a whole. It's no good changing them and not letting other people know. You've got to communicate them. Now, this could be done through departmental meetings. On the shop floor, could be done by toolbox talks, could be on a notice board, could be an email. It doesn't matter how you disseminate it. People have to know. One of the requirements of all standards is knowledge of the management system. And an auditor, and this is something I like to do when I'm auditing, is to ask a member of staff, where's your policy? What do you know about your objective within your department? Where do you find this bit of information for your management system? Because they should know it. So communication is important. If you change things, communicate it. So I did say this was a short one. Let's summarize what we've looked at. We looked at the management review meeting, and we know now it's a mandatory requirement in the ISO standards. So if you don't do it, that's a major non-conformity. If you do it but miss out a lot of it, that's a minor non-conformity. Preparation is key to success for a short management meeting. And just at this point, don't confuse the management review meeting with a business meeting. They are two different animals. A business meeting is looking at the company, the business, the organization as a whole. A management review meeting is looking at those areas within the scope of the management system and how they can affect or be affected by that management system. Two different agendas. Now, some people try to combine these with management meetings, and I think it gets messy and confusing. I think you should hold them separately, 6 months apart if you want, 2 months apart, a week apart, but hold them separately. That way you can focus on the information that are important to both of them and not get clouded with different issues. Just a suggestion, but I've seen it work in the past. Ensure that you cover at least the agenda items that are stated within the standard that you're certified to or going to be certified to. But to get the best from the meeting, include those areas that concern you about those areas of the business within the scope of that management system. You'll get a big tick in the box from an auditor who sees you go beyond just the minimum requirements of the standard. and make sure you document the meeting, the action points, the outcomes, and they are communicated to the necessary interested parties. They may be internally or externally, but more importantly, your staff. It's important they know what's happening. A management system only works when everybody at the company is actually behind it. So a little bit more about what we can do and we can help you with. So we can provide you with comprehensive toolkits on most of the standards, and within those toolkits are templates, forms, spreadsheets to help you fulfill the compliant requirements of the standard. And they can all be customizable. They can all put your logo on, and they can all have your name within the relevant areas of the document. And we can provide a service where we can do that automatically for you, because there's a lot of documents, so that's a lot of changing. We also provide ISO consultancy. We can, although the toolkits are there and you can actually use them yourself to get yourself up to a certifiable standard, ready for certification. Some people haven't got the resources, they haven't got the specialist knowledge. They're a bit unsure about what they should do and what they shouldn't do. This is where we can help. You can either buy an hour from us, or we can come in and help project manage your certification for you. And then finally, auditing. We can come in before you go to certification and do a full pre-certification audit as ISO auditors would do, so you're prepared and not in for a shock. Just make sure everything's there. And we can also help with your internal auditors if you don't have the manpower to do it, or you want an external body to look at it as an independent. We can do that for you as well.